The scent of citrus disinfectant and cold glass was the only thing that felt real. From 60 floors up, the city was a silent, glittering circuit board. My cart, with its squeaking wheel I never bothered to fix, was the only sound in the executive suite of Onishi Dynamics. The silence was a kind of currency here. It was what men like him bought with their billions. I ran a microfiber cloth over the vast, empty surface of his desk. Blackened oak, so polished it reflected my face, a tired, 18-year-old girl in a pale blue uniform and a crisp, white apron.
Thorough.
The night cleaner. A ghost who polished away the fingerprints of gods. I never saw him. None of the night crew did. Mr. Onishi was a myth, a name on the building directory carved in steel. But I saw the evidence of him. The faint, lingering scent of sandalwood and smoke in his private office. The perfect alignment of the 3 pens on his desk. The single, heavy tumbler left by the window, always with a trace of expensive whiskey at the bottom. He moved through the world with a precision that left almost no trace, and it was my job to erase what little remained. My professional identity was invisibility. I was good at it. I could clean a room and leave it feeling like no human had ever stepped inside. That was the goal. But tonight, the building's sterile peace shattered. The first sign was a flicker of the lights, a tremor so slight, I thought I'd imagined it. Then another. The massive monitor on the wall of the boardroom, usually a placid blue, flashed red. A string of codes scrolled past, too fast to read. The emergency lights kicked on, casting the hallway in a hellish, crimson glow. An alarm, low and guttural, began to thrum through the floor. The other cleaners were already gone, their shift ending an hour ago. I was alone. My training, the 5-minute video I'd watched during orientation, said to evacuate. My feet, however, remained rooted to the plush carpet. I wasn't a security expert or a tech analyst. I was the girl who emptied the trash. But I knew what a brute force attack looked like. My laptop at home, the one I'd built from scavenged parts, was my real life. Coding was the language I spoke when no one was listening. I crept toward the boardroom. The screen was a waterfall of corrupted data, a hostile encryption worm. It was tearing through the company's servers, locking everything down, rewriting and destroying as it went. Onishi Dynamics wasn't just a tech company. Their AI managed logistics for half the shipping ports on the West Coast. This wasn't just corporate espionage. This was an act of war. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. This was not my problem. I should run. Get out. Forget I saw anything. But I saw the progress bar. 70% encrypted. At 100, everything would be gone. Decades of work. A multi-billion-dollar empire turned to digital dust. Something inside me, a stubborn, angry spark of competence, refused to let that happen. I pulled the small, unmarked flash drive from my pocket. My own private toolkit. It was a risk so profound it was stupid. If I was caught, I wouldn't just be fired. In a place like this, people disappeared for less. But watching something so complex and powerful be so brutally dismantled felt like a personal insult. I found a port on the back of the server rack in the adjoining communications room. My fingers, usually deft with a cleaning cloth, trembled as I slid the drive home. The terminal screen was a chaotic mess. I took a breath, the air thick with the smell of hot electronics, and began to type. I didn't build walls. There was no time. I built a mirror, a recursive loop that redirected the worm's own encryption algorithm back onto itself. It was a dirty, desperate trick, a digital snake eating its own tail. For 3 minutes that stretched into an eternity, the two programs fought. The scrolling red text slowed, sputtered. The progress bar froze at 94%. Then it began to reverse. 81. 65. 42. When it hit 0, the worm collapsed, erasing itself from the system. The screen went back to its placid blue. The alarms cut out. The main lights hummed back to life, bright and unforgiving. The silence that returned was heavier than before. It was the silence of a near miss. I yanked my drive, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I had left a trace. A ghost signature in the code. A solution so unorthodox, no corporate security team would have ever conceived of it. I had saved them. And I had signed my own death warrant. I grabbed my cart and fled, the squeaking wheel sounding like a scream in the empty hall. For 3 weeks, nothing happened. I came to work. I polished the desk. I emptied the trash. The faint scent of sandalwood and smoke was sharper now, as if he were spending more time here, searching. I told myself I was invisible. A girl in a blue uniform. No one would ever look at me twice. That was the mistake. Someone was looking. Tonight, the elevator doors opened onto the executive floor, and the air was different. Colder. Heavier. There was a man standing by the window, his back to me. He wasn't a security guard. The suit he wore was a shade of charcoal so dark it was almost black, tailored with a surgical precision that made him seem carved from the city's shadows. He didn't move, didn't turn, but I felt his attention on me like a physical weight. This had to be him. Takashi Onishi. I kept my head down, pushing my cart forward.
Do the job.
Disappear. That was the rule. But the squeaking wheel gave me away. He turned slowly. The descriptions I'd overheard from the day shift staff didn't do him justice. They'd called him handsome. That wasn't the right word. His face was a collection of sharp, deliberate lines, his expression a mask of cold neutrality. But his eyes were not neutral. They were dark, intelligent, and utterly predatory. And they were fixed on me. He held up a tablet. On the screen was a single, elegant line of code. My code. The mirror I had built. For weeks, he said, his voice a low, quiet rumble that vibrated through the floor. I have hunted for the ghost who saved my company. I sent teams to every major city. I offered fortunes to every freelance hacker in the world.
He took a step toward me.
I backed away, my hand gripping the handle of my cart so tightly my knuckles were white. I was looking for a master strategist.
A rival.
A phantom. I never imagined, he continued, his eyes scanning my uniform, my worn-out sneakers, my face. I was looking for the cleaner. The tablet clattered onto his desk. The sound was like a gunshot in the crushing silence. He stopped in front of me, so close I could finally place the notes in his cologne. Sandalwood, yes, but also something else.
Cedar.
And smoke. The cold certainty of his presence was overwhelming. He knew. It wasn't a question. It was a verdict. Where's the drive? He asked. Not a demand. A statement. As if the answer were already his property. My world, once defined by the simple tasks of my shift, narrowed to this single, impossible moment. I was no longer a ghost. I had been seen, and the man who saw me did not look like the kind of person who let things go. He moved like the room owed him space, and it did. I was taken not to a police station, but down to a private garage beneath the skyscraper. A black sedan, silent and severe as a hearse, was waiting. A man with a scar bisecting his eyebrow opened the rear door. There was no discussion, no choice offered. One life had ended the moment he'd recognized my code. Another was about to begin. The car moved through the city with an unnatural smoothness, cocooning us in tinted glass and expensive leather. Takashi Onishi sat beside me, but he felt a world away.
He didn't look at me.
He stared out the window, his profile stark against the blur of neon lights. The silence between us was not empty. It was a container for everything I didn't know, and everything I was now terrified to learn. We arrived at a penthouse that seemed to float in the sky, a minimalist space of glass, steel, and shadows. The city spread out below us, a conquered territory. You will stay here, he said, his voice betraying no emotion. My technical team will be here in the morning. You will walk them through everything you did. I just want to go home, I whispered, the words feeling fragile and foolish. He finally turned to look at me, and the cold neutrality in his eyes was gone, replaced by something ancient and hard. The people who attack my company are not businessmen. They are my competition. A rival clan from Osaka. They don't just want my market share. They want to erase me. By saving my work, you made yourself a part of this war. They are not looking for a tech genius. They are looking for a weapon. And now, so am I. That was the moment the floor dropped out from under me.
He wasn't a CEO. Not just a CEO.
The tailored suit, the quiet authority, the men who moved with the coiled stillness of predators. It all clicked into place. The Yakuza. The word bloomed in my mind like a black flower. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "I want to know why," he said, his gaze intense, searching. "You had nothing to gain. Everything to lose. Why help me?" I thought for a moment, the honest answer rising to the surface. "I don't like watching bullies break things." A flicker of something, surprise perhaps, crossed his face before the mask slammed back into place. He gestured to a room down a short hall. "You will be safe here. No one will harm you," a promise that sounded more like a threat. It was a cage, no matter how gilded. The next few days were a blur of interrogation. His tech team, men in sharp suits with sharper minds, questioned me for hours. I explained the recursive logic, the way I'd turned the attack inward. They looked at me with a mixture of awe and suspicion. I was an anomaly, a variable they couldn't account for. Takashi was always there, observing from the corner of the room, silent and watchful. He said little, but I felt his eyes on me constantly. He was studying me, dissecting my every move, my every answer. He was trying to understand the weapon he had found. The danger he'd spoken of didn't feel real until Thursday. I was in the main living area, looking down at the city, when Takashi entered with two of his men. His usual cold composure was fractured. There was a tension in his shoulders, a grim set to his jaw. "They know," he said, his voice flat. "Somehow, they know the breach was stopped by an individual, not a security protocol. They're hunting for a person." My blood ran cold.
How? A leak.
"There's a traitor in my organization." He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something other than calculation in his eyes. A sliver of vulnerability. "This is my shame to bear. Years ago, my sister, she was used as leverage against my father. The same clan. They found a weakness in his defenses, and she paid the price for it. I swore I would never allow such a failure to happen under my watch. That no one under my protection would be endangered because of me."
His wound.
He wasn't just talking about business. He was talking about a debt of blood. The shame he carried was a palpable thing, a chill that emanated from him and cooled the air in the room. He saw me, a girl in a borrowed silk robe who was so far out of her depth she couldn't even see the shore, and he saw a ghost. A past failure he was desperate not to repeat. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the penthouse. The floor-to-ceiling window beside me spiderwebbed. I screamed, stumbling back as another shot followed. His men moved instantly, pulling him back, shouting into their wrists. But Takashi didn't move toward safety. He moved toward me. He crossed the space in 2 long strides, grabbing my arm and pulling me down behind a thick marble counter. His body covered mine, his weight solid and absolute. The air was filled with the smell of gunpowder and his cologne, a strange, terrifying mix of violence and intimacy. Glass rained down around us. "Stay down," he ordered, his voice a low growl in my ear, so close I could feel the vibration of it against my skin. I was pinned beneath him, my face pressed against the cool fabric of his jacket. My heart was a wild drum against his. In that moment of pure chaos, with bullets tearing through the air, I felt a strange, illogical sense of safety. He was a shield, a wall of unyielding force. When the shooting stopped, the silence was deafening. One of his men was on the floor, bleeding. Another was returning fire from the hallway. Takashi didn't move from his position over me until he was sure it was over. He pushed himself up, his movements economical and precise. He scanned the room, his eyes missing nothing. Then he looked down at me. His expression was unreadable, but his hand, still gripping my arm, was tight. It wasn't a gesture of comfort. It was one of possession. "They know you're here," he said, his voice dangerously quiet.
I had a chance then.
In the chaos, I could have tried to run, to blend into the panic and disappear. His organization was compromised. His fortress had been breached. Staying was a death sentence. But as I looked at the blood on his pristine floor, at the grim determination on his face, at the way he was still unconsciously shielding me with his body, running felt like a betrayal. He had failed to protect his sister. I would not be another ghost to haunt him. "What do you need me to do?" I asked. That was the choice. The moment I stopped being a victim of circumstance and became a player in the game. His eyes narrowed slightly. He had expected fear, tears, pleas. He had not expected a question. He had not expected an ally. He said my name for the first time. Not the cleaner. Not the girl. Zara. It sounded different in his mouth. Not a name, but a claim. The penthouse was no longer safe. We moved that night, slipping out of the city in a convoy of identical black cars. Our destination was a remote estate north of the city, a place of stark, traditional Japanese architecture hidden within a forest of pine and maple. It was beautiful, and it was a prison. There were guards at the gates, men with watchful eyes and secrets in their smiles. Here, the war became digital again. Takashi set me up in a room filled with monitors, the hardware faster and more powerful than anything I could have dreamed of. My job was to find the leak in his organization and to build a defense so absolute that the rival clan, the Hashimoto Gumi, could never touch his empire again. I worked for days, fueled by coffee and a cold, simmering rage. This was my fault. My cleverness had put a target on my back. Now, my cleverness was the only thing that could save me. Takashi was a constant presence. He would bring me trays of food himself, setting them down without a word. He'd watch me work, his dark eyes tracking the lines of code as they flew across the screen. Sometimes, late at night, when the house was asleep, he would talk. He never spoke of his business, but of the code. He understood its logic, its brutal elegance.
He saw the patterns.
He saw me. One night, I found the traitor. It wasn't a soldier or a lieutenant. It was his chief of technology, a man who had been with his family for 20 years. The betrayal was deep, a poison in the roots of his clan. I showed Takashi the proof, encrypted messages, offshore bank transfers. He looked at the screen for a long time, his face a mask of stone. But I saw the muscle in his jaw clench. "This is a debt of blood," he said softly. "It will be paid." He left the room, and I knew a man was going to die. I told myself it had nothing to do with me. I was just the one who found the truth. But my hands were shaking. I had pointed the gun. Even if I hadn't pulled the trigger, I had crossed a line, and the ground on the other side felt unsteady. The next day, the Hashimoto Gumi escalated. They couldn't get through my new firewalls. They couldn't touch Takashi's finances. So they changed their target.
They went after me.
A message appeared on my screen. It was a live feed from a street camera. It showed my mother, walking home from her job at the library. A black van crawled along the curb beside her. The message was simple: the weapon has a family. A cold, paralyzing fear seized me. This was what I had dreaded. My ordinary world, the one I'd tried so hard to protect, was now in the crosshairs. I stumbled out of the tech room, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I found Takashi in the garden, practicing with a wooden sword, his movements a blur of deadly grace. "They have my mother," I choked out, showing him the tablet. He stopped, the sword held perfectly still. He looked at the screen, and the air around him seemed to drop 10 degrees. The cold, controlled mask of the leader vanished, replaced by a raw, lethal fury. He was no longer a CEO or a strategist. He was a predator whose territory had been invaded. "They will not touch her," he said. It was an oath. He made a call, his Japanese rapid and sharp. Within minutes, his men were moving, a quiet, efficient army dispatched to protect my family. But I knew it wasn't enough. They would keep coming for them as long as I was a threat. "There's another way," I said, my mind racing. "A way to end this. Not just defend, attack." He turned to me, his focus absolute. "What are you proposing?" "The Hashimoto Gumi's greatest asset is their shipping network. It's how they move their money, their product. Their entire operation is run by a proprietary logistics AI. It's their heart. I can stop it." You mean cripple it, he corrected, his voice low. I mean kill it, I said, meeting his gaze. I can write a virus that will not just erase their data, but will cascade through their hardware. It will brick everything. It will take them years to recover. It will be financial ruin. What I was describing was an act of cyber warfare on a scale that would attract federal attention. It was illegal. It was dangerous. It was morally gray, a territory I had never intended to explore. But they had shown me a picture of my mother. All other considerations had burned away. He studied my face, searching for something. This will change you, Zara. There is no coming back from it. They started this, I said, my voice hard as steel. I'm going to finish it. For the next 48 hours, we worked together. He sat with me, a silent guardian, as I wrote the most elegant, most destructive piece of code of my life. I was no longer a ghost in the machine. I was a weapon being aimed, and it was my own hand on the trigger. The night we were set to deploy it, an alarm shrieked through the estate. Ambush. They had found us. The attack was swift and brutal. They came over the walls, silent figures in the dark. Gunfire erupted. The house, once a sanctuary, became a war zone. Takashi's men were good, but they were outnumbered. He shoved me into his office, a room fortified with steel. Stay here. Lock the door. No, I said, grabbing his arm. They're coordinated. They're on a network. I can disrupt it. I scrambled to his terminal, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I hacked into the attackers' comms, feeding them ghost signals, false locations. I turned their own technology against them, but one of them got through. The door splintered, and a man with the Hashimoto crest tattooed on his neck stood there, a gun leveled at me. I froze. Time seemed to slow. I saw the flash from the barrel. I braced for the impact, but it never came. Takashi moved faster than I thought possible. He threw himself in front of me. A grunt of pain escaped his lips as the bullet slammed into his shoulder. He didn't fall. He pivoted, a knife appearing in his hand as if from nowhere, and the fight was over in a single, fluid, lethal motion. He slumped against the desk, his hand pressed to his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. The sight of his blood, dark against his white shirt, broke something inside me. I rushed to his side, tearing a strip from the curtains to press against the wound. You're hurt, I whispered, my voice trembling. He looked at me, his eyes dark with pain, and something else. Something raw and unguarded. They will not have you, he breathed. The tension confession. It wasn't a declaration of love. It was something more dangerous. A statement of fact. A claim made in blood and violence. I belonged to him, not as property, but as a part of his world he would die to protect. The attack was repelled. We had won the battle, but the war was still raging. Takashi, his arm in a sling, refused to rest. He stood behind me as I prepared to launch my virus. My hands were steady now. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, clear purpose. Are you certain? He asked, his voice rough with pain. I looked from the screen to his face, to the cost he had just paid for me. Yes. I hit enter. We watched on the monitors as the code spread through the Hashimoto network. It was beautiful and terrible. Systems flickered and died. Servers flatlined. Within 10 minutes, the heart of their empire stopped beating. It was over. In the aftermath, the silence was profound. The threat was gone, but the world I had known was gone with it. I could never go back to being the girl with the cleaning cart. I had helped topple a criminal empire. I had a Yakuza boss's blood on my hands. A cost had been paid by both of us. He had taken a bullet for me. I had sacrificed my old life, my innocence for him. Nothing in this world was free. Days later, when the dust had settled, Takashi found me on the balcony overlooking the forest. The bandages on his shoulder were a stark white against his black yukata. The ink of a dragon was visible at his collar, its scales intricate and dark. He stood beside me, not speaking for a long time. The silence between us was different now. Comfortable.
Known.
My world is a dangerous place, he said finally, looking out at the trees. You do not have to stay in it. I can arrange for a new life for you. Anywhere you want to go. You and your family will be protected. It is the least I can do to repay the debt I owe you. He was giving me an out. A return to something resembling a normal life. I could take it. I could walk away and pretend the last few weeks never happened. I could try to forget the smell of gunpowder and the weight of his body shielding mine. I could try to forget the way he said my name. But I knew I couldn't. The girl who polished desks and dreamed of code was gone. In her place was someone else, someone who had faced down monsters and found she had teeth of her own. Someone who had seen the man behind the mask of the ruthless leader, the man who carried the shame of his sister's death, who would bleed to protect what he claimed as his. His acknowledgement of what I was to him wasn't in his words, but in his offer. He was giving me a choice, the one thing he had taken from me that first night. He was honoring me, not as a weapon or an asset, but as a person. I turned to look at him, at the sharp, deliberate lines of his face, the dark intelligence in his eyes. I thought of my old life, of the invisibility I had cultivated. And I thought of this life, of the terrifying, vibrant reality of standing beside him. And what if I don't want to go? I asked. A slow, almost imperceptible change occurred in his expression. The tension in his shoulders eased. He didn't smile, but the coldness in his eyes warmed by a single, crucial degree. He didn't say he loved me. He didn't make promises of a future. He simply looked at me, a silent acknowledgement passing between us. The choice was made. My choice. He turned back to the view, and I stood beside him, shoulder to shoulder. We watched the sun begin to set, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. I was no longer his cleaner or his prisoner. I was his equal, a queen of a shadowed empire I had helped to save and helped to build. The air was cool, the silence was peaceful, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. I was seen.